That's the root problem of the situation, is that there's hate, and love, even if it means suffering that hate, can be something that is transformative and redemptive.
And in fact, Christianity is built not by bricks and mortar. They are built by the witnesses of the martyrs. People who loved, people who gave their lives, who reached out to the poor, who opposed the Roman Empire, and were sacrificed for their faith.
It means that it's going to cost something. It's going to cost you because you've got to speak truth to power. You've got to challenge people who want to silence you. You've got to fight against this constant accusation of anti-Semitism.
It was like a little light bulb came on, partly seeing the physical mechanisms of oppression.
So if you want to actually help Palestine as much as you can, in your context, make the United Kingdom democratic. And therefore, the elite won't so much say that the hedge funds, the banks, the arms companies will not dictate to you what your country is doing.
Okay, so let's go to Samuel. Samuel, you've just heard Reverend Simon Woodman's explanation of Christian Zionism. Would you say it's fair to argue that Christian Zionism is focused on the second coming of Jesus and Palestinian Liberation Theology is focused on the lived example of Jesus during his first coming? Is that reasonable, or what's your understanding of Palestinian Liberation Theology? Because we did hear from Shireen that she's not a theologian, and you are.
First of all, you do not need a PhD to be a theologian. Theology is defined as God talk. In fact, the greatest influences in my own theological upbringing have not been people who have been trained professionally. And we should not consider theologians as these academics only, although they have their role, but something that is more inclusive. Most of Jesus' teachings was around the dinner table, not in lectures or in workshops. So that's just to begin with. With regards to Christian Zionism and Palestinian Liberation Theology, perhaps let me first define Palestinian Liberation Theology and how it critiques Christian Zionism. So I'll define Palestinian Liberation Theology in reverse. So what is theology? Theology is God talk. This includes speech, engagement with the incarnation, for example. What is sin? How do we fulfill and relate to some of the commandments in the Bible, to prophecies, and also eschatology, which is the second coming of Christ, which is a source of hope. It is not something that is not engaged with in Palestinian Liberation Theology. In the opposite, it tries to redeem that vision that Christian Zionists distort. So that's theology. Liberation theology is a movement that emerged in the Global South. First, it was attributed to Latin America, but it was also in Africa and also with North America with Black liberation theology. And liberation theology sees sin not only as individual sin, I lie to you, I hurt you, I will curse God, but liberation theology sees sin in systems. In other words, sin distorts relationship between God and human with one another. And liberation theology says that's found in systems. So capitalism is a structure, is a sim of sinfulness. Colonialism is a structure, is a system of sinfulness. And if that is a structure of sinfulness, our mandate is to be in revolution against it. So that's liberation theology. And Palestinian liberation theology is amongst these movements, and it does theology with the point of departure of the Palestinian experience. So it doesn't take for granted that we are objective. I don't think no one is objective. It's not what we look at, it's what we look with. In other words, we should do identity in politics, not identity politics necessarily. And Palestinian Liberation Theology attempts to do this theology through the method of contextualization. So you look at the Bible, you look at the principles, you look at the tradition, and you try to contextualize it to your own reality now. That's why a lot of our theology is encapsulated in the Kairos document, the signs of the times. How do we contextualize sin in our life? How do we understand the mandate that we have to be witnesses of Christ? And the theology of Palestinian Liberation Theology is a Christ-centered theology, whereas Christian Zionism is one that it fetishizes and centralizes the role of Israel and the role of the Jewish people in this idea of a two-covenant theology. So there's a covenant with Abraham and there's a covenant that Christ paved, so there's two paths, and those two covenants are determined by blood, not by faith. And Palestinian Liberation Theology says, no, you got that all wrong. It's not about your blood, it's not about your identity, it's about your faith in Christ. Therefore, how you understand the prophecies, how you understand the Bible is through a Christ-centered lenses that is inclusive rather than exclusive. It is not this exclusivist, nationalistic God that chooses to genocide another people in order for the promises to be fulfilled. Rather, it's a God that chooses to be crucified in order for the promises to be fulfilled. So that's one aspect that Palestinian Liberation Theology differs from Christian Zionism. And then a second thing that I think is important is the idea of how you do hermeneutics. So sure, you have people who read the Bible literally. Sure, you have different interpretations of the Bible. But the way you interpret the Bible and the way you use it is a symptom to a certain power dynamic that you are in. In other words, the literal reading of Revelation, the Lamb, the four horses, the apocalypse, the second return, is to do with an inherent positionality that one may be in. So that is a symptom of a problem, which is a colonial one in its essence. It's one that's seeking to dominate. It's one that's seeking to put oneself as the victor over another. And in that sense, though, any way you engage with the New Testament, whether it be in eschatology, whether it be in the book of Romans, the gospel itself, and also your praxis of what it means to be a Christian, will be directly oppositional and will differ substantially. So that's in short some of how I understand Palestinian Liberation Theology and how it differs from Christian Zionism. Another note, it's important to note that Christian Zionism in its origins was not found in the evangelical mega churches in the United States, but it was actually grounded in the mainline churches in Europe, within a context, within a genealogy of Western civilizations, Western colonization. So in other words, including perhaps churches that you're in right now, it would be worth looking at the history and tracing your own complicity into that theology, rather than just pointing the finger at American evangelicals.
Thank you. Thank you. Samuel, I'm learning very quickly that one of the dangers about interviewing you is that when I ask you one question, you answer that, and you also answer the next 5 questions I was planning to ask you. So in your very first answer, you did refer to Jesus and empire. I'm going to actually move on to Swee now, Dr. Swee. Samuel has suggested that Jesus and empire are essentially antithetical. They are opposed to each other intrinsically. I'd like to discuss with you the church and empire, because Jesus and the church are obviously very different. The first hospital attacked after October the 7th was a Christian hospital. Israel continues to claim it had nothing to do with that attack, but since then, Israel has destroyed several churches and the entire healthcare infrastructure of Gaza. Dr. Swee, can you give us your thoughts on where the church establishment is in all this? What are they doing to oppose genocide? And are they complicit?
Yep, I think you have answered for me. I think when you talk about the church, which church are you talking about, right? And I want to tell you about the hospital that was bombed. The Ackley Hospital was built around the turn of the 19th century by the British missionary of all people in Gaza. And in fact, it's the first hospital built in Gaza. And it has served the people of Gaza independent of religion for a long time. That's why it's called Ackley Hospital. Ackley in Arabic means native. It is the native hospital. You see? So okay, you know, we talk about the church, but let me tell you, I can't deal with the church. I go to a Catholic church now, Roman Catholic church, okay? I was baptized in a Presbyterian church, Bible Presbyterian. Then I went to an Anglican church, and when they refused to talk about the Palestinians, you know, I just gave up. I went to yet another church, and then I decided I'm going to Catholic church. They don't misinterpret Revelation. They talk about Jesus. And at every Mass, they read the Bible, they talk about Jesus. So it is not a question of shopping for a church. It's a question of finding a community that actually is centered around Christ. Now, Christ is a very different person. It's a person. It's not a church. Church is a body and institution. Like when Ackley Hospital was bombed, okay, initial body count 478, right? And these people were sheltering in a Christian hospital because they thought, certainly not the church. They won't bomb the church, right? So they were bombed. There's a drinking fountain to drink from the water. They were killed. And how did the church react? Now remember, this hospital belonged to the Church of England, although it was financed by the Baptists. Okay, Ackley is always called Baptist Hospital because the Baptists financed it, but it was a Church of England church. I went to work in Ackley Hospital because the Bishop of Jerusalem asked me to work there. That's the first Intifada. And how did the official Church of England react? They told us to shut up, because in bringing to attention to the world about Israel bombing a Christian hospital, you heighten anti-Semitism. Yep, and even now, when they lately screen a forensic architecture, you know, kind of reconstructing how Ackley was bombed and how it was planned and what is munition used and so on, we have a lot of hostile criticism that we are feeding into the anti-Semitic words and so on and so forth, quoting from the Church of England, that we should calm down. We shouldn't speak about this because it's not helpful. Now, that is one kind of church. But if you actually take church as a body of Christians, the Christian martyrs who will give their life to bring the truth to people like me, and in fact, Christianity is built not by bricks and mortar. They are built by the witnesses of the martyrs. People who loved, people who gave their lives, who reached out to the poor, who opposed the Roman Empire, and were sacrificed for their faith. Yeah, and I remember this very well. It's something which lately I thought about. You know, when everybody talk about the Good Samaritan, if you don't know that, you haven't gone to school, okay? so pardon me. Okay, so this man was going up from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell by thieves and they beat him, leaving him for dead. A Levi passed and looked the other way. A priest passed and looked the other way. And who actually stopped? A Samaritan, the outcast. Because to the Judaic tribes, the Samaritans is not pure. Right? The Samaritan stopped, dressed his wounds, paid the innkeeper to look after him. So now, with all this genocide going on, none of us look the other way. Because Jesus said, you do the same. And don't I want to be that Samaritan? That is a new calling. I want to be that Samaritan. I don't want to be a Levi. I don't want to be part of the church establishment. You can call me anything you like. But basically, it is your relationship with God, you as a community with God, you as the follower of Jesus, you and your relation to the Palestinians who are the brothers and sisters and the children of God. So that is church.
Thank you, Dr. Swee. I'd like to move to Charlotte now. So Charlotte, you've spoken to me about costly solidarity. Can you define what that means, both for the church as an establishment and for us as individuals?
Yeah, it's actually very much what Dr. Swee was just talking about. So we hear this cry from the Palestinian church, from Palestinian Christians, and that cry dates back decades now, but it comes out with the same message time and time again, whether it's a genocide happening in Gaza, families being displaced in Silwan, yet another war, sweeping across the region. And that cry is, will you help us get our freedom back? That is the cry that has come from the Christian community. And it's not supposed to be a passive cry where we all go, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we'll help you. We'll pray. That's what we'll do. Nothing else, we'll pray. It's about us putting our lives on the line as Christians, doing what Jesus commanded, which is take up your cross daily. What does that mean for me as an individual or for us as a church, as a community and a body of Christ? It means that it's going to cost something. It's going to cost you because you've got to speak truth to power. You've got to challenge people who want to silence you. You've got to fight against this constant accusation of anti-Semitism. You've got to fight against people believing and calling you a Hamas supporter, for example. You've got to actually do something practically. So you've got to get on the streets and march. You've got to get up in your church and talk to people about Palestine, educate them, show them that there are Palestinian brothers and sisters who are crying out for you to stand up for them in solidarity, to call them your true brothers and sisters in Christ. And yes, it's about prayer, but it's about prayer and action. So it says in the Bible, and this is the verse which I have tried for the last 20 years to sort of live my life by, which says, faith without works is dead. So as a Christian, don't stand here and tell me that you believe in Jesus Christ and not act like the Samaritan on the road to Jericho. If you believe in Jesus Christ and you have a relationship with him and call him your savior, he is calling for you to do justice, to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And that means standing up and being counted when it's needed. It means costly solidarity. It means that I'm going to call on my church to divest. I'm going to boycott. I'm going to march in the streets. I'm going to shout at my MP no matter how long it takes me. I'm going to call for sanctions. And if I turn up one day at Tel Aviv hoping to visit my friends in Bethlehem and they have my name on a list and say, I'm sorry, you support the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, so be it. That's costly solidarity. You know, the number of people that will not speak up for Palestine because they're fearful they can't go back. You know, in the grand scheme of things, it's a wonderful thing to visit Palestine, and I'm not telling you not to go. I'm saying go if you can. But if the price of their freedom is us managing to isolate Israel and force it to comply with international law, then that is the price we have to pay. I think that's probably enough.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, that's not enough, but it's a great answer to that question. Thank you. I've got a tough one for Samuel. I think it's tough, Samuel. Can you come back? And so you referred earlier to the Kairos document, and the Kairos document is an important foundational document which states the Palestinian Christian response to occupation by Israel. And that Kairos document talks about resistance with love as its logic. My question is, how can love counter a genocidal government? I mean, the civil rights movement in the United States, they had to face police with dogs, but they never faced anything remotely like the mechanized monstrosity of Israel. How can non-violent resistance possibly achieve anything in this context? Over to you.
I don't know if this will answer your question because I don't know if I have one to offer, but I think I will build on the theme of martyrdom. And I think martyrdom in the sense of not necessarily glorifying suffering, but martyrdom in the sense of being a witness and choosing at all costs the path of love. And that's the root problem of the situation, is that there's hate, and love, even if it means suffering that hate, can be something that is transformative and redemptive. Important about martyrdom is that you mentioned the Kairos document, which is making faith relevant for us, liberation and facing with the context makes our faith relevant. Martyrdom makes it credible. And in order for us to combat hate with the opposite of it, which is love, is ultimately something that will make our faith credible, not only relevant, to those who suffer from the genocide themselves. So how can I proclaim these assertions that God is good, God is just to the people of Gaza? And I think it's through witness, and through witness of martyrdom. So that's how I would relate that to that question. But I think also love is a power that goes beyond oneself and beyond the conventional powers that are used against us to commit genocide. Love is something that allows you, as the Good Samaritan, to say, not what will happen to me if I save that person on the road that's beaten and naked, which I cannot tell their identity, but what will happen to them. And ultimately, love is it's seen in the incarnation, in the Christian story, is a reality. It is a power that no matter what the empire might do, they can never take that away from me. They can never take that power away from me. And that's why the cross is a symbol of the empire that tortures. It's a symbol of punishment to political rebels. But through the transformation of Christ, suffering by the way of the cross, it has changed into a symbol of power, a symbol of hope. And that is what love is. Love is turning something that is ugly and death and disgusting into something that is beautiful. So I think that power and that faith will never be separable. Even if they bomb us, even if they imprison us, they silence us. That love is something that they cannot take away, and that's the message of Emmanuel. And Christmas is not for everyone. Christmas is for the oppressed. The oppressed need to celebrate Christmas. The oppressor cannot celebrate Christmas, because that's the essence of it. And the second and the third thing, sorry for going a bit long, is that love is manifested by enduring. We Palestinians, when I look at my ancestors, we have always been occupied by an empire. We have always been in the middle of empires. You know, Palestine is between 3 continents, which has strategic values to empires. And nevertheless, we remain resilient, and that's not to make us into superpowers, but that love of our land, love of one another, love of community, love of future makes us not fatalistic, but helps us to carry on being resilient, being embodying Sumood in our lives. So that's how we can counter empire.
So we're drawing to the end of our questions. I've got one more question for each of our panel members. So if I can go first to Simon. Simon, I visited the West Bank many years ago, and it was certainly a life-changing experience for me. Can you give us an idea of your experience of Christian activism in Palestine and how that experience has changed you?
Yeah, thank you. So I first visited Israel when I was an undergraduate doing a study visit back in the early 90s. And at that point, the sort of the wider politics of this just entirely passed me by. I was doing, archaeological digs and that kind of stuff. And then I went to Greenbelt for many years, which for those who are in the know is a Christian arts festival. And through organizations such as Sabil Kairos, as it's become, and Embrace the Middle East, I started to get this idea that actually there was something going on there that I was unhappy about, and which was sort of pushing up my sense of injustice. But I didn't really know too much about it. And then I think about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, Jean, who is at the back of the church here, give us a wave, Jean. Jean was a trustee here at the church, and she said, why don't we do a visit? And we did a church visit, and we went out and we met with the Christian community in Bethlehem, and we stayed in Bethlehem and traveled through the West Bank, and it was like a little light bulb came on, partly seeing the sort of the physical mechanisms of oppression, the restriction of the water supplies, the division of the country by roads and settlements, and, so just sort of seeing the wall, seeing this stuff and having it explained, that was part of my journey. But the other part of it was meeting people like Munther, who welcomed us into his church and immediately got me to do a Bible reading, and then the next time we were there got me to help administer communion with him. And to meet, getting to know people like Samuel and the other Monias since then, meeting these people who, it seems to me, are embodying the path of the Jesus that I have been trying to follow. And I really struggle, as somebody who has no skin in the game, to quite know how to respond. But I take a great deal of comfort from a story from this church's history, because in 1961, Martin Luther King came to preach here. So this is a place where he spoke. First time he preached in London. And he came to speak to a predominantly white congregation to mobilize them, not for the civil rights struggle in America, but about predominantly the apartheid struggle in South Africa. Because Martin Luther King knew that injustice anywhere is justice denied everywhere. And this sort of global perspective that there is a role that somebody like me can play if I am willing to learn from those who are living the injustice. I shouldn't need to be silenced because I do have something that I can do. And I think my message to other Christians in the UK is we are all too often silenced by this. We're afraid to speak out. We haven't thought through the theology, and we just acquiesce quietly with a terrible oppression that has been going on for a very long time. And it took me some theological moves, some seeing it, and some meeting of some people to unlock the activist in me. But that's kind of what got me to a position of actually wanting to be willing to speak out publicly about it. I don't know, what was that the question?
So next question for Swee.
What? You're asking me
I'm
a
going to
question?
ask you another question, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So you're a surgeon, you're a physical healer.
Yeah.
You strike me as somebody who has some spiritual healing properties as well. Jesus was primarily a spiritual healer who also did a bit of physical healing. What do you think of the idea of health workers and churches coming together to fight for the human rights of Palestinians, and how can we make that happen?
I think it's already happening, right? It is already happening because, health workers, surgeons, doctors, we are here to heal people, sometimes unsuccessfully, but always to comfort, right? And we cannot say that, okay, surgery is technical, and it's really technical, and sometimes now it's robotics all the way, but what is a surgeon? A surgeon is someone with the human heart, reaching out to someone who is suffering, trying to give whatever skills we have, but overriding that physical skills, which a robot will give in 10 years' time, there is the human compassion. And that's what ties us all together. Whether you're a health worker, doctors, nurses, hospital worker, cleaner, and so on, we are in the caring profession. And if you say, I care, and then you allow people to be genocided, allow people to ethnic, it doesn't square, right? You cannot walk into an NHS hospital and be very kind to your hospital and have your head filled with the massacres, the burning of people alive in the tents. And in fact, I've just got the statement from the Kamal Radwan Hospital, which I promised to tell you, 400 people, the life threatened. And in fact, there are only 75,000 people left in Gaza from the original 1.1 million. So I don't know where everybody went, okay? Some killed, some displaced. Now, we just cannot, I cannot go to my friends and pretend, oh, we're very happy today. I operated on 5 patients without telling them I'm very sad because they killed 50 in Gaza last night. So my whole department knows. So they can fire me if they like, but if they keep me on the department, I wear Palestine on my forehead. If you don't like it, I want to tell you something. Orthopedic surgeons are very conservative and right-wing, okay? I'm an exception. So I tell you, it was very difficult, and I never knew which way my colleagues lie because, God, I'm an upstart or crazy or what. Then I got arrested on the flotilla and put in Israeli prison. So when I was coming out, I came out of prison. I said, how do I go back and face the department, First of all, I told them I'm going sailing. And then now, I came out of Israeli prison, and then when I walked in the department, they all clapped. This is Swee. We're so worried about you. We wrote to our MPs. We attacked the BBC not covering the news and so on. They are bastards, aren't they? My colleague, orthopedic surgeons.
Thank you, Dr. Swee, for that answer. Only you could do that. So, Samuel, can we come back to you? I've got 2 more quite profound questions I need to ask, but I've just been told I have 10 minutes left. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. Samuel, okay, can you please explain the gospel of liberation for Palestinians, and particularly, I'm afraid you're going to have to be brief because we have to get through 3 questions now in 10 minutes. Can you briefly explain Sumood and Intifada and what that means for the Palestinian Christian community?
Yes, so I'll be very brief. Sumood and Intifada are theological sources for us as Palestinian theologians or Palestinian people, because if we believe in the God of the oppressed, then God manifests themselves with the oppressed, and therefore the oppressed can become a source of revelation. And I interpret Sumood in the idea of resilience and in the idea of martyrdom as what the gospel means in Palestine in the 21st century. So if you want to understand when Christ says, "Follow me and pick up your crosses," that means usmud, that means be resilient. The same goes to the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is all about not being tempted by the empire and remaining resolved, even if it's to the point of death. And we can see Christ as the ultimate Samid, the ultimate person who embodies the Sumood in the most perfect way. So it's a way of saying, what does the gospel mean in the 21st century? One of them is Sumood, and that's a theological concept. The second is Intifada, not as a violent or non-violent event, but it's more of a idea of dying to self, to resistance. And that is also a theological source in terms of understanding the baptism and the crucifixion and the resurrection. What it means to be a disciple of Christ is to perform intifada. You know, the baptism is the waters of baptism are the ones that purify you, but also the ones that drown you. You die to self, and that's some of the theological concepts of intifada. And how we discern God's actions in history is through the movement of people resisting oppression in creative ways. Now, the reason why Sumood and Intifada are important for theological sources is because a lot of Palestinian theology is based on Western sources and methods, which can at times be one that unknowingly perpetuates Western epistemological hegemony. And therefore, using these concepts and understanding and creating Palestinian theology can further indigenize it. If I'm going to use a bit of a medical term, if you need to diagnose the problem in order to provide it the suitable remedy. And the problem in the Palestinian context is settler colonialism, as seen in Zionism. And therefore, the remedy for it is de-colonisation. And de-colonisation is not only about resisting and being political in what you do, but it also means decolonizing your own mind, which is always under, whether it's in your upbringing or in your education, is always something that is subject to control and domination. And I think this is relevant for everyone worldwide. I try to be as concise as possible.
Samuel, you have actually answered my next question for you, believe it or not. I was actually, let me ask it now, just to bring it out in a bit more detail, since we're on this subject. So Palestinian Liberation Theology developed essentially as a response to a Western imperialistic idea of Christianity. And there's obviously a risk of this ending up excluding Palestinians, even though it is designed to liberate Palestinians. Do you think Palestinian liberation theology itself needs decolonization, and why?
Yes, I touched upon it a bit. I think It's important to differentiate colonialism and coloniality. Coloniality is the condition that may continue after colonialism is there. In our case, it's ongoing. And that's the way you think, that's the way you articulate yourself. And Palestinian theology has been, many of the Palestinian professional theologians have been trained in the West, and most of their work is to advocate to the West. And that's fine, and that's good work. But there's a disproportionate attention, both in how we use theology and who we are aiming theology to, who we're targeting, with regards to the internal, to the Palestinians themselves. So there's always a need decolonization is not necessarily an end goal, but it's a continuous angle to understanding power dynamics and being aware of it. And therefore, Palestinian theology ought to have that, because most of Palestinian theology, believe it or not, is written in English to people that are like yourselves who are in the UK. And I think there's a gap between Palestinian theology and the lay people. And in precisely identifying them also as theologians, even though they do not necessarily speak eloquent English or educated in formal institutions. So decolonization is really key and important. And I think for people sitting in the room who may be supportive of Palestine and are clapping your hands and supporting what we say, I think your role is to try and create a roadmap, galvanize the demonstrations, the activism that you have to real structural change, which is one that disrupts the power dynamics and the status quo that is currently in the UK. So if you want to actually help Palestine as much as you can, in your context, make the United Kingdom democratic. And therefore, the elite won't so much say that the hedge funds, the banks, the arms companies will not dictate to you what your country is doing. So yeah.
Thank you. Charlotte, our final question is for you. We have 2 or 3 minutes left. I just wanted you to talk about how the gospel of liberation applies to non-Palestinian Christians here in the United Kingdom and around Europe and the United States. We've heard some senior church leaders speak out against Israel's war crimes, including the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury. But do you think that's enough? Do you think the church establishment as a body is fully mobilized to free Palestine? And if it's not, how can we all in this audience make sure that it does?
Great. No, it's not. I had a few resounding no's there, so I'm glad I'm in good company. No, statements are not enough. Of course they're not. What they are is, I guess I'm encouraged by how many of our UK churches are starting to speak out more. And that's an encouragement because we've been challenging them to do that for 56, 57 years. And we've really struggled to get them to do that. You know, there is this constant desire for the church to apply balance to the situation. You know, we have to be seen to support Israel. We have to be seen, you know, not to oppress the Palestinians. How do we weigh these two? And our challenge to them has been, no, as Christ's followers, your position is on the side of the oppressed, not the oppressor. And that is where statements are not enough. You know, statements need to have action behind them. So at the same time, we are calling on all of the churches in the UK, divest your money from any company which is profiting from Israel's war crimes, whether that's occupation, apartheid, genocide, whatever it is, divest your money from that. Use your influence. You know, we are constantly saying we have 26 bishops in the House of Lords, and we have a government that cannot even sanction the likes of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are actively calling for a genocide against the Palestinian people. You know, absolutely shame on them. And then we have 26 bishops in the House of Lords. Use that influence in our government. But I genuinely believe that this oppression against the Palestinian people will not fall because one day the powers that be wake up and decide, oh, enough's enough, you know, we'll sort it out now. It will fall because of a mass movement of civil society. It will be the doctors in the hospitals. It will be the teachers in the playground. It will be you and me and every single one of us demanding justice, saying enough is enough. And that is where every single person here, whatever sphere of life you're in, wherever your walk is, whoever your friends are, your family, your workplace, you have a role to play. It's where healthcare workers and Christians and Muslims and teachers and a whole spectrum of civil society need to come together and to fight against this. And that's what I think will eventually, and hopefully in our lifetime, bring justice for the Palestinian people.
Thank you. I think that's really brought a close to our questions. So I'm going to call this meeting, I think, to an end. Thank you to the audience for your huge engagement. Thank you to our panel members. Can we bring Samuel up on the screen? Because I think he's been a revelation. Thank you. Samuel, thank you so much for your contribution. It's been so important to have your authentic voice from Palestine and your theological insights into the problems we're facing. I want to thank all of our panel members. Thank you. If we can just give them all a round of applause. And I think Alina is going to come on stage and thank everyone from health workers and everyone who's been involved in the organization of this event. But she's not going to thank herself. And I think she has done a huge amount of work in organizing this event. So if we can all thank Alina Shari. Thank you.